Earl Nightingale.
Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
He has this quote, and I think I mentioned it before to start this podcast. I'm not even sure if it's his quote. It could be a quote that's been around for hundreds of people in different eras. But needless to say, man, I stand to this. You got to know where you're going. You got to have a goal. Always have a goal, whether it's small, like it's me. I want to finish the last sip of this water. That's my goal. And then after that, your next goal is I want to finish another glass of water. And your goal maybe is to accomplish 10 glasses of water a day, but you got to finish the first one. You always going to know where you're going. As we talked about earlier, if you don't have a goal, you'll never get there.
Hello, and welcome to the Business Aviation Collective podcast, which is sponsored by LD Aviation. Today we have a different guest on our podcast. His name is JR Lilly, and he is in the maintenance side of aviation, which we actually haven't had a maintenance person on our podcast before. So welcome, JR. I appreciate you coming.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to talking to you guys and sharing some of my experience on whatever questions you may have.
Wonderful. All right. Well, I think as everybody knows, it takes a team, right, to run a flight department or to keep these airplanes running smoothly. And the maintenance department is a huge aspect of that. So let's kind of start off with, how did you even get into aviation in general?
Well, I started out in the military. I worked on Blackhawk Helicopters. I was mainly an avionics electrical guy. And after 9 years of doing the Army thing, I decided to go civilian. So leaving the Army, I got a job at this company, Dynamic Aviation, and I've worked with them for 11 years. And I started out as a non-A&P avionics guy, and I really didn't know if aviation was my career. And I was kind of a little biased towards fixed wing aircraft, so to speak, because as a helicopter guy, and I was like, oh man, these things are so simple and so easy to work on. But needless to say, after a couple of years, I got my A&P license. I worked as a maintenance controller, maintenance control supervisor. I got my pilot license, most of my ratings in that. Became an IA, started a few businesses in the middle of that. And then after 11 years, I reached a pinnacle in my career where I'm just an on-call mechanic now. I go work on private jets when they break in my region. And other than that, I just hang out at home with my toolbox.
Oh, all right. Okay. So that makes me, I have a bunch of questions on that. So let me back up. First of all, for those that may not know, what is the Blackhawk helicopter? I mean, obviously it's a helicopter, but what are some of its strengths?
Oh, yeah. So cargo, loading passengers. They use it for medevac a lot, huge into medevac, where they could have because medical crew, you could throw a stretcher in there. And also it's a real versatile helicopter. It has a lot of good features. That flies relatively fast. They're reliable. Two G 701 engines on that thing. It's a great machine. Really versatile for the Army and for the contracts. And right now, if I'm not mistaken, I believe they're taking these and they're going civilian with them. And a lot of private sectors are actually buying Blackhawk helicopters and use them in the civilian world.
Interesting. Yeah, I know. I have seen some of the helicopters being used for checking power lines, and I don't know if that's probably the same thing, and then we do have clients that fly in and out of New York City on helicopters. You fly in, then jump in the helicopter and pop into your meeting. Very cool.
That's pretty badass.
Right? Yeah. So your specialty is avionics. So can you tell maybe some of us that aren't so good with what that actually is?
Yeah, absolutely. Trying to make sure I phrase this correctly for our audience. So the computer screens inside of any aircraft, all the computer screens, the navigation equipment that tells you, that directs you how to get there, all the wirings, the antennas, just basically all the computer instruments inside of an airplane or helicopter would be considered avionics.
Okay. All right.
And so when you split the two, you got a car has a battery and alternator and power. So that's more on the electrical side. And then when that communicates to a box, now you're talking about the avionics side of it.
Okay. Very cool. Interesting. So when you left the Army, then you went into dynamic aviation. You said you got your A&P license and later on your AI. Is that IA? Oh my gosh, I'm backwards. AI means something completely different. Probably we shouldn't bring up on the podcast. Anyway, okay. Tell us what is the whole process on getting those licenses and what do they teach you?
So my A&P license, I had a lot of military experience. So once you have enough experience in your airframe power plant side of the house, so airframe meaning I worked on these airplanes, I've done these type of inspections. I actually had hands-on time. I think it is 2 years. Don't quote me here on this. It's been quite a few years since I thought about it. But I think you have to have at least 2 years of actually hands-on time working on engines and airframes. And once you have that, you can go get your sign-off from the FAA FSDO. And then you go to a class or a school. So I went to Carolina Aeronautical, and there's Baker's Aeronautical. There's quite a few schools out there. Some of them are 2-year universities, but some of them are like a 2-week program if you come off with a lot of experience. And so once you go there, it's here's what the test looks like. You got to pass a written test, and you do an oral test, and you do a practical test. So the written test, just like any other test, you study a bunch of questions, answers, you go knock that out. And it's 3 subjects. So you got airframe, power plant, general subject. And then after that, you go meet, we call him a designee mechanic examiner. So you got an examiner who asks you, for me, it was like over 4 hours of questions.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And just verbal, just me, you just like this podcast where you're just making eye contact with each other. It's like, so Mr. Lilly, tell me, what is it like working on a fabric airplane? What do you do if you got a hole in there and you're like sweating bullets and it's coming down the side of your face? You only get a certain amount of wrong answers and you fail and you got to try again. So needless to say, after you pass the oral, you're like, oh, thank goodness. And then you go into the shop and now you got to prove that, you know what, I am a good wrench. I can fix things. And for me, I never forget this. So he walks into the shop. He's like, congratulations, passing your oral, Mr. Lilly. What I would like for you to do now is fix this prop. And this is a true story. He picks up this prop, walks over to a table and just smashes it across the table. And he gouges the side of this prop. And he said, my toolbox is over there. When you get done fixing it, come and find me. And that was the start of my 12-hour day of fixing.
Oh my gosh.
And you own like a personal shop. So once you go through that, you have some experience, you get sign off from the FSDO. You get past your written, your oral, and your practical. Congratulations, you're now airframe and power plant mechanic. You are now licensed to work on in registered airplane in the United States. And so 3 years following that, you have the experience to go get your IA. And not many people do this, very few out there. It's an inspection authorization. And so you'll go, same thing happens. You'll go take a written test that's closed book. You don't know the answers or the questions before ahead of time. It's just like, now you got to be pretty squared away. You got to know what you're doing.
Okay.
And, you'll pass that and you'll become an IA. And there's some requirements to keep that up. And it's every 2 years worth of requirements. And then that the ability to return airplanes back to service.
Okay, very interesting. I mean, I've been in this industry for a long time. I didn't really know that whole process. So yeah, it's kind of similar, harder, but I would say similar to at least the written part. For dispatchers, when we get our dispatch certificate, we have to do a whole oral, we have to do the practical and the written as well. And those oral exams are, they're pretty stressful. Somebody looking at you, asking questions.
I could fix an airplane. I could pass the written test, but when I made eye contact and I'm like, don't be wrong. And I'm just like saying things out loud with no book, nothing in front of me. I'm like, okay. Be fun.
Oh, very cool. Well, that's a big accomplishment, but it sounds like you went even further than that. You said you got your pilot's license. So tell us about that.
Right before, when my wife was actually pregnant, and I'll tell you the whole story. So I've always wanted to become a pilot. That's true. Ever since I was a kid, ever since I was in the military, I always had this passion to fly. I love aviation. I really do. And I made up with it. Like, this is what I do. I enjoy doing it. I do it outside of my full-time job multiple times. I just do it because it's fun and I like it. And I like to share my passion. So if you're okay with this story. So one day I'm at Dynamic Aviation and it's a little Cessna 172. For those who don't know, it's a little small single engine plane. And it was sitting out in the field. In Dynamic Aviation, we just had this giant, like we all call it the graveyard. This airplane's rotting away over there. And one of the guys who worked at our company, he had his 172 sitting out there, and it flew maybe once every couple of years, basically just rotting away, just like the rest of the airplanes. And Joe's his name. And Joe was out there and I saw him. He was hand propping this and he had it chalked. And he just looked like he was having a hard time hand propping. He was an older gentleman. And I'm walking to go home across the flight line to get in my car and go home. And I'm like, man, I feel like I should go help. And so something inside of me was like, you know what? Let's go help Joe.
Mm-hmm.
So I paused, walked across the runway out where I used to work. You can just walk back and forth across the runway. It's kind of weird, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So we walked across the runway. I'm like, Joe, you need a hand? He looked at me. He was like, JR, yeah, that'll be real nice. I like to get this thing started. And I haven't started in a while. I'm like, all right, Joe, yeah, I can help you. And so he gets in, holds brakes, and we get this thing started up. And I hop in with him. He taxi down, listen to the engine running and so forth. And I asked Joe, I was like, what's wrong with it? Why you got a hand started? He's like, well, every time I put a new battery in, it just dies. I'm not sure what's going on. And so I said, well, Joe, I can help you. I can look into that and see what's going on. And so the next day, I go out there with my toolbox, just like I promised, and found out the voltage regulator, it wasn't putting out 14.6 volts, I think it is. And that was like, wasn't putting out enough voltage to charge the battery. So I cranked up the potentiometer. I did a cap check on the battery, stuck it all in. And next thing you know, the engine's firing up like it should with the ignition. So Joe was real.
Wow. Yeah, I bet.
Joe was real pleased. He was happy. And he said thank you. And he still hasn't flown the airplane. It had moss growing on the trailing edge. I don't know if I should share the story on the air here. So, anyways, a week or two later, like something hit me. It was like a notion. It was like, you know what? I would like to become a pilot. I wonder if Joe would be willing to trade me services, do something to fly his airplane. I have quite a few friends who are instructor pilots, and maybe this is my ticket. Mm-hmm. And so I went to Joe. I gave him my proposition. I was like, hey, man, would you be interested in let me fly your airplane to fix it and so forth and maintain it? He was like, nah, I'm not interested in that, JR. I'm really sorry. Yeah, I don't think that's going to work out for me and Gary, the other owner. I was like, okay. I kind of let it go. A week or two went by. Joe came back to me. He's like, JR, I got to thinking. He's like, I don't want to just give you time for your maintenance service. What I want to do is give you an ownership. If you're going to be part of this, I'm going to give you my share of the airplane. You maintain it, you work on it, you get it back in the air, and she's yours to fly.
Wow. Oh, so cool.
Yep. So what I say to the audience, a little act of kindness sometimes goes a long way.
I was just going to say that. Look at that, what happened then. Just that one day you got back out of your car and said, I'm going to help.
Yep. And so, after that, 6 months later, I was a pilot. Yeah, pretty fast. I flew like every day. My wife was pregnant too, so I felt like I was on a timeline. I was like, I got to go fly.
Yeah, you're right. Because once that baby's born, she's probably going to prefer you home a bit more.
Yeah, wouldn't happen. Needless to say, I got my pilot license. And
That is so cool. That's like a cool timing story as well. I mean, like you said, if the baby had already been born, maybe you wouldn't have had time to do it. Or maybe you wouldn't have gotten out of your car because you needed it at home or something like that. So you have your private. What other ratings did you go for?
Right now, I have a tailwheel endorsement. So I'm a tailwheel pilot. That airplane, I since sold my share back to Joe for free. I gave it back to him. I bought a Stinson. I own a 1947 Stinson 108-2.
Cool.
And I actually bought it in Oregon.
Okay.
I flew this airplane from Oregon to Virginia.
Wow. Flew out, picked it up, and flew. I mean, I guess you commercially flew out.
So that's a funny story too.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Some people say I got a golden horseshoe. It's not the case. Opportunities seem to come and I take advantage of them.
Take advantage. Yep.
So needless to say, my friend Gary, who owned the orange airplane actually with me, he calls me up. He's like, JR, I'm looking at buying like a Mooney or something faster. I want to travel back and forth quicker and so forth. I found one in Idaho. Would you be interested in me flying you out to Idaho to do this pre-buy inspection? I was like, Gary, I'm not flying to Idaho, man. That's a long trip. I do have a friend in Oregon who may be interested from going to Oregon, Idaho. I don't know. I can make a phone call for you. He's like, yeah, I would really like that. I really like this airplane. Okay. And so I call my buddy Greg. He lives in Oregon. And a few years before that, I was out in Oregon helping him work on a fire management plane. And I met this guy named Doc. He owned a Stinson. And at the time, he was like 90 something years old. And so I met him. He had this awesome little grass strip, bunch of cool toys, old BMWs, and this like motorized engine, this really cool classic cars. Like I was in heaven. Like I could live here. Just give me a cot in the floor to hang here. I'm good. So needless to say, like I hung out with those guys for like a week. We had us like just hanging out, talking to Doc, met the Stinson. So I called my buddy Greg, going back to that present day moment there. So I called Greg. I was like, hey, Greg, would you be interested in going to Idaho? He was like, no, Jared, he's older. He's like 70 years old. He's like, I ain't going to Idaho. Going to whatever it was. I'm like, all right. And I was like, well, how's old Doc doing? Just catching up with him because I haven't talked with him for a year or two. And he was like, I'm sorry, hate to say this, but he passed away. And I was like, dude, that's a shame. And I started talking. I'm like, what about the Stinson? What about some of these other things? He said, well, the Stinson's for sale, I think. The family hasn't posted it. They haven't done anything. And at that time, I didn't have the money. Lindsay had no money. I was like, but I'm going to buy this airplane. I will figure out a way to go buy this airplane. And I did.
Nice.
And so I flew across the United States of America, landed in Oregon, did an annual inspection on it, paid Doc's family, and hopped in the airplane with my friend, Ronnie, who had a lot more tailwheel time and instructor pilot time. And we flew it from Oregon to Virginia.
Wow, that is a great story.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you're doing tailwheel flying, and now you still have that airplane, and you just
I do.
Yeah, I bet that's a beautiful one.
It's a mint. It's all original, 1947. It has the original Franklin 165. For those who are 75-year-old airplane, leather seats, wood interior. Like it's absolutely like a gorgeous airplane. I wanted to take it to some shows and fly into some point. Just time right now is always hard to find.
Yes, well, like you and I spoke a little bit before the podcast started. You have 2 small children, which all of us can relate to how much time that takes. That is so cool that you got that. That's another one of those things. You were being nice. You were trying to help somebody else, and good came out of it.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Okay, so now you've gone through and you've got your licenses. You said that you had been working on creating your own company or companies. There's been more than one, I believe you said. Tell us how that's gone.
So, as a lot of people, I'm a dreamer. I'm an entrepreneur for sure. I'm always thinking about what else can I do. I'm never satisfied. It's definitely a problem sometimes. Like I always want. And I push hard. I work hard and I push hard and I want more. And so at the time, I think I finally got enough experience. I got a lot of confidence. I know what I'm doing at this point. And I'm always a studier. I think you should always be a pro. You should never be an amateur. You got to be a pro. You got to study. You got to be really skillful at your craft. And
good advice.
You do so, that takes more effort outside of work. So I always tell, like, especially new mechanics, I'm like, hey, you just don't go to work, go home, turn on a little TV, eat some food, and go to sleep. You gotta become a pro. And that always kind of goes through that whole regime there and how to become a pro. But needless to say,
that.
And so when the ADS-B mandate came out for the FAA for the 2020 mandate, so ADS-B for those who aerial data broadcasting system, so it's a required communication transponder that communicates with other airplanes and back to, it's no longer radar basically. So it allows it just makes things safer in there, I guess.
Okay.
And so it's provide like a safety cushion for the FAA and for other pilots. Now we see the other pilots around us. It shows up on our screen. We show up on their screen. We don't always have that third party person, meaning like the controller or so forth, telling us, hey, there's an airplane, 2:00, 600 feet. You're like, yeah, we already know. We alerted. We see him. We got it. And so things are a lot safer now because of it. But it was a 2020 mandate came out, and basically we had to, if you didn't have it, you had to upgrade your transponder.
Okay.
To meet the requirements of that mandate. And I went around, I started a small company. I partnered off of Shenandoah Avionics, and I went around and I installed a ton of transponders.
Okay.
And I really just went from airport to airport. I worked 40 hours during the day and 40 hours outside of that, just doing avionic installs. And at the time, it was great for me because now I got to know general aviation. I started to learn like the smaller aviation side of things and not just dynamic, which is a little bit medium, large airplanes, King Airs, Dash 8, and so forth. Now I'm actually getting to know like the grassroots of aviation. I'm meeting people who fly Stearmans and small Cessnas and grass flying and tailwheel flying and like what it means to be a mechanic in the smaller shops or working.
Sure.
And it just really opened my eyes to a whole different side of aviation I didn't even know existed. And it was really cool. So I did that for 2 years and we decided to dissolve it at that point because we really didn't have any intention more than what we were doing, just to go make some extra money and install some transponders. And we did.
Went in, completed that job, and then on to something new then.
Yep, we did. Yeah, recently this was a failure on my part, and it's more of a tech company, so I tried the tech side. Now I know I'm a hands-on guy. I just did go turn wrenches and fix things. I did start a company, Aviation Mechanics of America, had a little during the COVID thing, and my goal there was to almost like Savvy, but this was kind of before Savvy was really popular. So,
well, tell us what is Savvy actually, because I'm not familiar with it.
Oh yeah, so Savvy, which Mike Bush owns the company, runs. He's an A&P, IA guy, teaches a lot of really great things with managing, maintaining your airplane and so forth. So Savvy is basically the company that tries to look out for aircraft owners. So if you take your aircraft to a shop, they're there to make sure that the maintenance is done properly, your logbooks are done properly, and just kind of give a second set of eyes. Because as you both know, some people driving the car may not know where the battery is. And the same thing with pilots. They may have a license to fly, but they don't really know much more about the maintenance side. And so Savvy's there to kind of split the difference and help people out.
Okay, very cool. So you started a company similar?
Yep.
Or complementary, I should.
Yep. Complementary for sure. More on the tech side. So my goal was to help aircraft owners manage their maintenance. So basically create a digital platform for that and also connect them. So if they're broken at an airport, they don't know who to talk to, how to figure out how to fix this problem, how to find parts, so forth. Now they have a networking system. They get on a MOA. I called it a MOA, Aviation Mechanics of America. So you get on a MOA, they're like, okay, I'm at Blacksburg Regional Airport. Oh, bam, 25 mechanics are in the vicinity. And these mechanics meet the qualifications to help me fix my problem. And now I have connection network for it. And I had an AD tool on there. So for those who don't know, ADs are airworthiness directives.
Okay.
They are put out by the FAA for safety reasons. So they might find okay, we need to replace this part because if we don't, this is breaking in this manner, which could induce a safety risk in the aircraft.
Okay. That makes sense. I'm sure a lot of us have heard about them and we don't deal with them a lot in the S&D world, but definitely hear that.
Especially as a maintenance controller, scheduler, dispatcher, that's something that bounces around quite a bit. Oh, we got a new AD. So now you look at your fleet and what is applicable for this AD or what airplanes are now affected by this AD. And now you have time frame. Now we got to fix this problem. And so now you're looking at, okay, now I need to schedule the time to make this, to satisfy this AD, or maybe it can wait until it goes to a shop. And there's a bunch of criteria that immediately go into action when ADs come out.
Okay. All right. So that was part of AMOA, what you guys did. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I spent 2 years building it. And unfortunately, we just didn't get it off the ground.
That happens. And I think that's really important to recognize entrepreneurs or just anybody really starting a business. Sometimes they don't work out. I totally have had that same experience. We started a side of the company and we put a lot of money into it and we finally just realized we can't, it's just not a viable option. So then you got to start somewhere else. But it was really good. I'm sure you learned a ton of lessons along the way.
I did. It became a lot better outside of that. I knew what I'm good at and I know, okay, here's what I need to do different.
Yeah. Very cool. So kind of touching back between maintenance and scheduling and dispatch, what would be maybe what would you like S&D groups to know, or how would you like them to talk to you or communicate with you? Any suggestions?
Oh, yeah. Especially with schedulers or dispatchers, just know what the job is you're asking a mechanic to do. Even in my current role as an AOG mechanic, and I work on a lot of jets and so forth, sometimes a lot of there's a difference. There's like scheduled maintenance and unscheduled maintenance. So scheduled maintenance meaning these are planned events that should happen throughout the year to keep the airplane flyable and airworthy. And then there's unscheduled maintenance, like this was not planned to be broken. We are now stuck. And so I think it's really important as a scheduler or dispatcher to understand, like, okay, what side does that fall in? And does the team that is now you're asking to work on the airplane, can they even do this type of job? Because what you find out, like, oh, this is a lab sink inspection, and we're like, hey man, I got hand tools here on a flight line. Like I can't tear apart the interior of the airplane to do this inspection. So a lot of times there's a lot of miscommunication or misunderstanding just because they don't understand it or don't have the knowledge yet of what it takes to maintain or do that inspection. So
Great advice. Yeah.
Yeah, I always think it's huge to really understand what you're asking the guys on the ground to do.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's huge. Great advice. So along the way, I guess you have started some businesses, you have a full family, you're working 40 hours, you're doing a lot of stuff in general. What helps you or what motivates you to do all of this?
Well, family is always number one. That I do a lot just for the family. Like I always push, but I don't know. I always think if you're going to do something, you got to go 100%. Like you can't be lazy about it. Like if it's a great idea, if I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, oh man, that's awesome. I literally have this paper here and I'm writing down notes or whatever comes to my head. I write down notes and I have books, like, and sometimes it's just mostly just trash. Like I should just go burn them. But needless to say, like I'm always thinking, like I'm always trying to improve my situation, not necessarily financial, just because I want to learn, I want to grow, I want to become better at what I currently do.
Yeah.
I always feel like I have more to offer, like truthfully.
Sure.
I feel like I don't want to be stagnant. I want to give more. And I think that's half the reason I even saw this podcast. I'm like, there's an opportunity to share something, like give more.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody out there will take something from this. Like, oh man, that's awesome. Yeah, I want to do that. And maybe it'll just inspire somebody. Or I teach sometimes at this is another thing. I have taught at a Blue Ridge Aviation as an A&P school. I was a professor. I go in there and I do speeches for the students there as well. So I'm always just really trying to share and help. And I know for your podcast, schedulers and dispatchers, I was telling you earlier, that's the spider web. You're the center of the spider web. Like things happen on the end, and then Charlotte's Web, it comes to the middle, and then they have to design this and make it real strong, and it goes to the end. And the mechanics are on one end of this thing hanging onto a tree branch, and the pilots are on the other end of this thing hanging onto the other tree branch. But you're in the middle. You got to be able to connect the dots and make this strong.
That is a great analogy. And you said something too before the podcast. You said mechanics, let's see, the pilots were the revenue side. Mechanics are I can't remember now.
I wish I could remember. Right?
It was great. And I should have written it down.
Yeah, pilots definitely are the ones that make the money. Mechanics try to save. Yep, we're here to try to save and spend as less as possible. We're here to keep the airplane up quicker and prevent a bigger loss. I forgot the actual word I used. It was great. It
was a great, I'll see if I can find those notes later. But yeah, and then schedulers and dispatchers were in the middle to make sure that those two things kind of connect and everybody else is on the same page. So
yeah.
What about, you mentioned a couple of inspirational books and quotes that you have. Maybe talk to me about a couple of those books that you really think are good to read.
Well, I have read a lot of books over the years, but I've been in this weird kick, like Think and Grow Rich is a huge one.
I like that one. Yeah.
Richest Man in Babylon. I read that book had to be like 5 times in the past 3 months.
Really?
And have you ever read it?
No, that one I haven't.
The Richest Man in Babylon. I highly, highly, highly recommend that book. And more so than any other book that I've read. I did this, I forget which book. Napoleon Hill wrote another one. I'm at a loss here. But needless to say, going back to The Richest Man in Babylon, definitely if you haven't read it, read it. It's just really short stories. It's easy to read. It's easy to understand. And sometimes those little things you listen to are like, you know what? Yes, I can do this. I am able to accomplish this goal, because all these are short stories of how people went from really bad, dire situations to become really prosperous, whether it's just spiritual, financial, whatever direction you're trying to accomplish.
That's very cool. Richest man in Babylon. All right. I'm going to pop that up there on the details of the podcast in case anybody wants to see what book you're talking about. And the Napoleon Hill ones, those are great. So really great. How about a favorite? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Nope.
Earl Nightingale.
Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
He has this quote. I think I mentioned it before to start this podcast. You got, and I'm not even sure if it's his quote. It could be a quote that's been around for hundreds of people in different eras. But needless to say, like, and I stand to this. You got to know where you're going. You got to have a goal. Always have a goal, whether it's small, like it's me. I want to finish the last sip of this water. That's my goal. And then after that, your next goal is like, I want to finish another glass of water. And your goal maybe is to accomplish 10 glasses of water a day, but you got to finish the first one. You always going to know where you're going. As we talked about earlier, if you don't have a goal, you'll never get there. There's no way you can get there. You won't even get out the harbor. And if you do get out the harbor, you're probably going to end up derelict on an island somewhere.
Yep.
In aviation, the goal for the pilots to get to that destination. He can't see that destination. He's really trusting his abilities and his training, and it's going to get there. He knows he's going to get there. He's just following that. And any ship out there who leaves the harbor, he doesn't know where that land is. He just has a compass. He knows, if I go this direction, that's my goal. I will get there. And so what I always say, it cannot not happen. If you got a sound goal and you write it down and you know where you're going, you will get there.
Right?
It has to happen. It's a law. It will happen. And that,
I think to highlight what you're saying, you really may not know that pathway, but you know where you want to be at the end.
Exactly. You just got to sometimes just trust the things around you to almost get you there. And it's weird how that happens. And opportunity is a huge one. Attitude and opportunity. So if you have a good attitude, you take advantage of opportunity, you have a goal, dude, I'm telling you right now, like, this is coming from somebody who really, started out pretty on the lower end of things. And I always set a goal. And so far I accomplished them. We'll get there. And it takes years. It's not tomorrow. It's not next month. It takes years, and you never lose sight of that goal. The key is, don't wait 6 months like, oh man, this is never going to happen. Just keep going.
Yep. One step at a time.
That's it.
Oh, that's really good advice. Yeah. And I really can recognize, or I feel what you're saying, because I feel like that was kind of my pathway as well. It was just, I knew where I wanted to go, and I'm not there yet, but I know just little by little, one thing at a time, and I will get there.
Absolutely.
Great advice. Right? And then you can put that into, like you said, drinking the water. You could put it into maybe completing a certification of some sort, or completing a school, or a bachelor's degree, or whatever it is that you wanted. You can put it into practice there. Well, JR, gosh, you've talked about a bunch of stuff and given a really lot of good advice. I feel like there's going to be other people who might want to ask you more about what you've done. Oh, I'm kind of switching gears here before I finish up. We talked about briefly the direction that the industry is going right now. And we talked about specifically in your field of aviation, in the maintenance department. Where do you think that the industry is going?
I really think brick and mortar is going away. I'm not saying it will go away in every airport or so forth, but I guess the desire or the need for mobile aviation, or mechanics to be in a truck to have fully equipped is huge right now. They want to, because airplanes are mobile. You never know where you're going and where you'll break at and so forth. You got to unplan. You need to know who to call. So I think going away from brick and mortar is going to happen, because I can do everything in your hangar or on a flight line or wherever the need may happen. And also helps out, especially with margins and so forth. But I do see that and a lot more growing AOG mechanics, a lot more people doing scheduled maintenance inside the owner's hangars and so forth.
So how does that look? So you bring all of your tools over to the airplane?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
So let's start real simple. So you have a Cessna 172. We have an annual inspection that's due. So they're like, hey, JR, would you mind knocking out my annual inspection on this 172? I look at the maintenance manual. I'm like, okay, here's the special tooling, equipment I need. I know the airplane at this point. I have experience with the airplane. There's really not much specialized you need, and I can just bring my truck over and some hand tools, and I can pretty much do the inspection as needed right there on the spot.
That is great. What do you think might have triggered some of this getting away from the brick and mortar and going remote or elastic, maybe you might say?
I think the need for flexibility and convenience. Pilots want convenience.
Yep.
They really do. They want to fly when they want to fly, and they need to be flexible. So a lot of flight schools, unfortunately, like, oh man, we're waiting for weeks for the hangar to open up or the shop to open up. Oh man, we really can need somebody to help me change my alternator that's broke out in Louisa County here. So there's a need for it. And I've been kind of asking questions, talking to aircraft owners. And the more I talk to them, the more the need is like, it's really clear to me. It's like, absolutely, there's a direct need for the flexibility and convenience here. And maybe the market doesn't go where they're searching for us. They sign up like a membership, like, okay, JR, charge me a yearly fee to accomplish all my scheduled maintenance. I don't have to have a hangar for that. Now I just have to manage their one airplane for a yearly fee.
Which then, like you said, brings down the cost of you don't have to have a hangar to have people come to you.
Like rules.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have to pay like all the extra fancy stuff.
Yep. So more money in your pocket and less money out of pocket for the aircraft owner.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great idea. Yep. Oh, I'm really interested to see how that's going forward, because I see it in a lot in the scheduling dispatcher space also. Many of us have gone remote and we haven't gone back. Now, it was really pushed by COVID, but a lot of us have not gone back. And I've been doing this for 10 years remotely. And so I really don't think you actually need to have an office. But yeah, having to maintain office space is expensive for a company.
Yeah, absolutely. Like when I was a maintenance controller or maintenance control supervisor for a while, yeah, there was no need for us to really be in the office, because what we're doing is we're managing airplanes that are not in the office. They're not on the hangars around us. They're actually out in the road. Yeah. And I didn't need to be there to manage those airplanes or help or communicate. But with that being said, there's always one really important thing you got to be really good at. And Lindsay, you know this very well, communication.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. If you got to be a good communicator, absolutely. Got to have a good turnover. Yeah. Yep. You just really be on top of it. And you got to be a pro at that, because if you are remote as a dispatcher or a scheduler and you are not a good communicator, it makes the job a little bit more challenging.
It sure does.
Not for you, but for everybody else around them.
That's very true. Yep. So thorough and complete communication. Yeah. Very important. Well, like you said before, you have to be a pro. You
do got to be a pro. Yeah. Can I go into this being an amateur? Well, you can be an amateur, but that's just where you'll be. And yeah. So if you want to, there's always different people. They got the 95% and they got the 5%. And for some reason, I don't know what makes the difference. Like me, you talked about the richest man in Babylon. I think Jim Rohn said it. It's funny. You'll say this to 1 million people, but only 5 or 10 people who hear it will go pick up the book. And I wonder, why is that? And there's no answer for that. It just is. Just because that is how it goes. And so same thing in aviation. Some people are like, you know what? I'm not just an engine mechanic. Maybe I want to be an avionics guy. But only 1 or 2 out of 1 million people to actually go learn the avionics trade. And I don't know why that is. I wish I knew why that was. And that'd be an interesting psychology subject at some point.
Yes,
but
it sure would be. But I think you're right. Yeah. How do you tell?
Yeah. I've always found myself like, I kind of want to do that. And I go do it. You know what? I kind of want to be a maintenance controller. I don't know why. I just want to go do it. Just to learn that thought. Yeah. You just keep gaining the skills. So, right now I work on jets. I was like, oh, okay. Here we go.
That's awesome. I think that constant need or want to learn, that's a big piece. Like if you could just keep on wanting to learn and being interested in what you're doing, I think that helps. I'm always interested in learning more, trying something else out and constantly learning.
Yeah, Lindsay, 1,000%. Never stop learning. Especially aviation. I will learn until the day I die. I still wouldn't I would know a very small percentage of what there is to know.
I agree. Yep. Well, JR, you are Very inspirational. And I'm sure that you've reached somebody. And I bet you're going to get somebody to read The Richest Man in Babylon now after we've talked about it. So kudos to you. If somebody wanted to reach out to you and maybe talk to you directly, how would they do that?
I think the best way to email me personally, my email address is jr.lilly, Lilly, number 8 @gmail.com. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. Yeah, please reach out if you have any questions or if you have any other questions. Looking forward to talking to you.
Wonderful. I really appreciate that because I do think people will want to reach out to you. Thank you so much for your time today, JR. And I really appreciated all you had to say. And again, I do think you're inspirational. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. Thanks for having me on the show.
You bet. Thank you for listening. Please stay tuned for more episodes and check out our website for up-and-coming podcasts. This has been a production of the Business Aviation Collective, sponsored by LD Aviation.